when you're looking to permit these water trails, in particular the canoe and kayak launches, there's two levels of permitting you need to look at. There's federal permitting and then there's state permitting. So I'm going to talk briefly about both of those. And I'll start with the state permitting. The basic permit that y'all would probably be required to get is an erosion and sedimentation permit. And this has to do with the physical placement of the canoe or kayak launch that you're proposing to put in along the state waterway. It sounds like kind of a bizarre permit, erosion and sedimentation. What's that have to do with the kayak? Well, the state has buffers on all the state waters, the state streams, and rivers. And in order to get down to the water, you have to go through that buffer. And so you're going to have to get a permit to do that. That's done through the Georgia Environmental Protection Division. They have a website, and what I will do is after my talk, I will post to the Georgia River Network these various websites and stuff that I'm going to talk about, and they're pretty easy to work with. The permits that y'all are going to be getting are fairly straightforward and easy permits to get, so you're going to need an erosion and sedimentation permit. The hardest part about getting a permit of this type is you have to have a fair amount of engineering design work completed before you can get the permit, and then you have to go through a public review, public notice phase. So from the time you get a complete permit submitted to the Georgia EPD till the time the permit's issued is usually about a 90-day period. You need to come in with your technical drawings and stuff, as well as the complete application. Normally, projects like y'all are working with, they're usually done through a third party, I would assume, through a consulting group or a local government, or probably both. And these entities are generally pretty familiar with the ins and outs of those specific permits that y'all are going to need. So you don't need to really truly bog yourselves down with the specifics of what you need for a permit. What you need to do is ensure that your consulting group, your design group, your local government, whoever the entity is you're working with, is familiar with this permitting process, with the Erosion and Sedimentation Act and the permit that's needed under that at the state level. And it's fairly straightforward. The second permit you need is from the federal agencies, particularly from the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. This is called a 404 permit. That's 404 refers to a section of the Federal Clean Water Act, which basically says if you're going to mess around in federally jurisdictional waters, which is very broad, has a very broad reach, you need to get a permit from the Corps of Engineers. Now, again, the process to get a permit from the Corps of Engineers is a bureaucratic paper chase, but again, you're lucky in the sense that the actual permit that you need is called a nationwide permit. These are very simple permits generally, and it will again take about a 90-day period to obtain a nationwide permit from the Army Corps of Engineers. In the northern half of the state, the Corps of Engineers operates out of an office down in Morrow, Georgia, and then there's another office for the southwestern part of the state down in Albany, and then a Savannah office which covers kind of the southeastern portion of the state. So depending where your kayak launch is, you need to go to the right office to submit a permit application. But again, a nationwide permit is an accelerated, fast form that will take approximately 90 days to get. So if you can get both of these permitting routes into the chute at the same time, you're going to come out ahead. Now, with that said, if your project is, if the canoe launch or kayak launch along a river is actually part of a larger permit or a larger project, which may have broader impacts other than just at the immediate launch site. For example, if it's part of a larger recreational complex where they're putting in soccer fields, baseball fields, excuse me, something like that. And those portions of the projects also entail impacts to waters of the state or federally jurisdictional waters. The review may entail what's called an individual permit at the Corps of Engineers level. That becomes a much more complicated process, and would probably take up to 6 months to get a permit in that case. But generally, if the single project, the single standalone project is just the canoe launch, you're gonna qualify for what's called the nationwide permit with the Corps of Engineers. 90 days maximum on that, and the erosion and sedimentation permit from the state, again 90 days, generally a maximum on that. And then basically you'll be permitted at the federal and state levels. Now, I can't talk for local county governments or local municipal governments is what you would need in those regards, but again, a lot of these projects are actually supported at that level. Excuse me. I'm actually getting over a cold. I still got a bit of a cough. So since many of these projects are actually sponsored by the local municipal governments and stuff like that, I'm sure there's not going to be a problem getting whatever's required bureaucratically at that level.